This is the point where I think everyone was thinking like, yeah, Mercedes might not win this. Maybe it wasn't a big doubt, but as in I think doubt started to kind of enter people's minds around Monaco. When you see Lewis in P7, you're like, okay, maybe there's something wrong. Maybe that the pace advantage isn't as big as it used to be. Obviously, we know that like the whole technical regulations this year was mainly direct. Like they obviously won't say it, but it was directed at making Mercedes slower.
Yeah, completely, and it did affect the low rate cars and all of that conversation. But at the same time, you can't blame them for that. They've always done that. That's how it always is. They always change the regulations to slow down the fastest car to bring the rest of the field together.
So, but they literally, I think the only thing you can say is they didn't slow down all the cars. They just slowed down the Mercedes and gave Red Bull enough pace to enough of a kind of gap. So now they've reached and they possibly even surpassed Mercedes. But I think the reason like you kind of people are upset about it, or Mercedes were very upset about it, is not just because it was directed at their car, but it was directed at their aerodynamic philosophy. So now they did not understand, like, their understanding of how the car operated essentially changed. Yeah. And this was the reason they had a lot of issues throughout the beginning of the season. The setup of the car was never, like, optimal. And it was because they didn't understand how the car is going to react. It took them, I think, to Brazil maybe or something, for them to really start extracting.
Yeah, they said the potential in the car, there was always speed in it, they just couldn't unlock it.
Yeah, so I think that says a lot about like the idea of you want to make the front team slower, fair enough, but I think targeting exactly like how the car operates.
Yeah, sniping Mercedes isn't exactly the best way of going about it, but to be fair to I really want to reword the sentence, but to be fair to the FIA, they couldn't go after Mercedes. Normally their thing is the engine, that's what makes them so fast, blah, blah, blah. But you can't just change that again because the turbo hybrid era and all of this, the amount of investment that went into that engine, you can't just rewind that and say let's go to a different engine really quick because Mercedes are too good. Like you have
so
to
they had to target the aerodynamics. Yeah. But it's weird that they changed it for this year, considering next year the new regulations are coming in. Because they could have just been like, oh, okay, just leave it this year. And then next year, the new regulations are coming in and it's going to level the playing field. Because they only targeted, like, the only team that actually lost pace a lot was Mercedes. Obviously, Aston Martin lost pace, but then because they copied the Mercedes car.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, it was literally called the pink Mercedes.
No, I remember that, but, like, I was trying to think of other teams that have lost pace that really consider it as just
them. That's the one thing that maybe I didn't find fair is you're slowing the front team, fair enough, but you're not bringing, the whole idea is to bring the whole pack closer together, but the gap is massive. The only thing you did is bring the first two close together, and then the gap between P1, P2 and everyone else is like, by the end of the race is like 20-30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's literally the average of like all the races, which I find to be insane.
Hopefully that's better next year.
Yeah, I have high hopes. So Baku, back to back. This is Charles Leclerc took pole again. So back to back poles.
So fast on street tracks, but then bottles it.
Yeah, but then the race starts, and everything just goes wrong for them.
Yeah.
Max basically leads most of the race until his tires decide to give up on him, and they give up on him at such a bad point of the track, because he could have easily, if he'd swung left instead of swung right, he would be going into like the entrance of the pit stop, not the pit stop, the pit entry.
Yeah.
And like obviously Stroll also had like tire blowout. See,
the weird thing is, won a couple laps before us.
Yeah, the weird thing is there's no indication that something's gonna go wrong. The teams weren't running the tires over the recommended. It was just they just went off. Why? I think this was kind of the start of Pirelli's. Just this year has been like, I don't get them. Their tires have been bad this year. Like they should have gone like, I'm not sure which compound they got for this race, but they should have went for the highest compound. But if this is their highest compound and they can't even do the job, then you're like, what's wrong, bro?
Yeah, it's a tough one for them. These new kind of tracks are weird for them because normally at a street race you bring the softest compound, but then here I'm assuming they must have used one of the middle ones. And then you give them the recommended life, but I guess so. I was listening to the Autosport podcast about this topic, and they said it's interesting because the engineers they've almost like forgotten about the possibility of a tyre blowing up. They'll like push the tyre to its limits. They'll go over the recommended like length, which to be fair, sometimes going over the recommended length is perfectly fine.
Ocon, yeah.
Ocon, there's no stop strategy, but like sometimes just going over by a couple laps or whatever, because you've been, I don't know, maybe you have an aggressive setup which is higher deg. Maybe you have, if you've been working the tyres a lot throughout a stint, which you can't really measure in a certain, like specifically to the point of, as much as AWS want to give you the graphic, there's no Formula 1 game graphic to say the tyres are on 0%, they'll probably blow up now. It will just happen. So they were saying fair enough, blame Pirelli, but also consider the engineers trying to finesse the.
But I think
the
this
limits.
Baku was the case where the team wasn't running. Like Qatar, like Fernando ran over the recommended, I think. But here they didn't run over the recommended. It was
I
within
think they went over by a couple. Not something major.
Yeah,
but they
like
were
if
told
you
not
go
to
over,
do like one stop, and they did a one stop.
If you go over, no, that was Qatar.
No, this one here as well.
Was it?
I think so.
Yeah, but
That's
like
what they said in the
even
podcast.
Stroll was within a few. Like he was about to pit. I remember he was about to pit. I think.
I
And
can't
then-
remember, but I have a feeling
then it
both of them
just
were
went-
doing the same thing. Like both of them were told, all of them were told don't do a one stop, and they ended up doing one stops and then going a bit over. Not saying they were the only people to do one stop.
But if the tire fails within like 2-3 laps or something like that of you going over the recommended limit, the recommended limit is supposed to be on the lower side. So even if you go over a few laps, you're okay.
Yeah, the recommended shouldn't be the tire will blow up now. It should be like
The fact that
take
like
it this long.
it should be the recommended life, but after this point you lose a lot of pace. It's not you go into a tire blowout and you're gonna die.
But then I guess at the same time you gotta say it varies so much between each car. The recommended for
but
Pirelli is like, the same way that Pirelli is saying, whatever they say this and that, but they're using their tire data, not specific Mercedes data or specific Red Bull data.
But that's you're giving an overall kind of.
It's an estimate.
This much. But like if I go like 2 laps over and my tire blows out. Are you joking? Like I literally went two laps over, and this is not a track where it's like a highly aggressive. Like you think of other tracks when you think of like highly aggressive on the tires, you don't necessarily think Baku.
No, you don't. To be fair,
like they don't have like the weird curves. They don't have like a. It's not like you don't think about it that way.
Yeah, it's not like Silverstone. I'd say is.
Yeah, so
and Spain, I guess.
Qatar as well. But you don't think of this. Saudi, you can add Saudi to this. So, I find like Pirelli has been a bit weird here. But Max ends up in the barrier. We have a red flag. Lewis starts, and Lewis. See, I was telling you, Lewis has mistakes. This is the biggest mistake of the season.
Yeah.
This is where Lewis.
Painful.
He could have won, and you'd have gained 25 points on Max Verstappen. And then he goes and presses a button that screws up his brake balance, and he has no front. I think he has no brakes at the front, something like that. And he ends up just going straight ahead. Perez wins his first race. I think up to this point, Perez has been a bit iffy, to be honest. He's not really performing
I
very
think
well.
there were questions there. Right?
But he wins here. I think this gives him a bit of comfort if you can relax. Because he's been performing kind of like you'd say Gasly was performing. He's a long way off Max. Or Albon was performing a long way off Max. But I think the difference is he got a win early on. And I think that gave him the comfort of he can win in this car. But obviously there's a very big gap between them. And there's also the fact that with Red Bull this year, they blatantly preferred Verstappen. They're like, Verstappen's going to win the championship, you're second driver. With Albon and Gasly, it wasn't as clear. So
he was still the favourite, but there was no championship there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it's kind of surprises me.
I don't know, I say he did alright, and I definitely remember at some point they had an interview with either him or Christian Horner saying Perez, I can't remember when his contract was signed, I might have to look this up, but
It was in Abu Dhabi.
No, it
wasn't. He signed
next
it.
year.
He signed it. It was signed
he
in
signed
Abu
a
Dhabi.
2-year deal.
No, like it was the 1 year one. I think he signed.
Yeah, but I'm saying for next year, for this year now
yeah.
coming. Yeah, I know that it was right at the end of the season he got his Red Bull contract, but at some point through the mid-season here, he got his contract for 2023, which at the time, you could almost argue wasn't justified, purely because based on his performances, he wasn't anything special compared to Gasly and Albon. But he definitely proved himself in the second half of the season, which he said also gave him confidence.
I don't think I think the reason he's got a contract, I think is because he's won in the Red Bull, and because of Turkey and the last race.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he got the contract.
No, he got that. Like, if you look back and you're like, why did he get that contract?
Yeah.
I think holding up Lewis at those 2 races really actually contributed to Max's win.
Yeah.
So you can, like, if they sit now and they're like, do you actually want to have him, or do you want to just fire him and get a new guy in? They'll be like, no, he actually helped Max to the championship. So next year he could do that again.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's not consistent enough for them to win the constructors.
Yeah,
his
qualifying needs to be way better.
And even his race pace, like he just like at Silverstone, he just dropped back and then he went nuts. Anyways, so after Baku, Lewis screwed up.
I'm still so because the worst part is like he always, if you watch Lewis on a race start, his one hand is obviously holding the steering wheel like a normal person because he needs the upshift. The upshift thing is with his paddle shifts like normal with his fingers, middle finger behind the steering wheel, and then his other hand, it's always like it wasn't a weird position for him. He always puts it on top of the steering wheel, but for whatever reason the button is there as well, and it was completely exposed. And yeah, he presses the button for whatever reason, makes a mistake, awful, and then they said afterwards that the button's still there, but they changed it so it's not as
no. There's a cover on
mistake.
top. There's a cover on top, so you can't press it accidentally. What's his name? Sebastian gets his first podium.
Oh, was this it?
Yeah, and Gasly gets his podium of the year as well.
Oh yeah, Gasly.
So I think Sebastian actually proved himself. I think like he went in a car that was arguably like the 7th best car, and he got 2 podiums.
Yeah.
And he actually scored quite well. I think he's.
Is that 2 including Hungary?
Yeah, I count that as a podium.
Count that as well.
Yeah, I don't care what they say. You know, the only reason we're gonna get to that, bro. I know the science behind it, but it doesn't make sense.